This video will look at how to reconcile your transactions inside of the system. So firstly we go to Merchant and then Sales, and then from the transaction drop down we click on Transaction List. So from here we can search the transaction history by either using a keyword search. We can select a specific type of transaction. We can filter by transactions that have completed or not completed, whether they were successful or not. We can search across date ranges and also specific dollar amounts. So just taking a closer look at the information on the screen here, the number is a unique identifier tied to the transaction itself, not the order or invoice that generated it. The date is the date that the transaction was created. The type, of course, is the type of transaction. We can see the customer and the amount that the transaction is for. The completed flag tells us whether the transaction has been completed or not. So for instant payments such as credit card and PayPal, this should always say yes. However, delayed payments like corporate account or direct deposit that require some reconciliation, these may say no. And then the approved flag tells us whether the transaction was successful or not. The matter is in most instances going to be either an order or an invoice. This is the object that the transaction is tied to itself. We can also see the portal that it was generated on, and we can also see the currency. So if we're looking to reconcile a transaction for a specific order or invoice, it's important that we're looking down this column here for the correct order number rather than this column, because again, this is the transaction identifier, not the order or invoice number. If we click on the transaction number itself, we can obtain some more information about the transaction. So we can see all the basic details here, and then any additional information that's been returned by either the payment gateway or third-party system. Now for credit card payments in particular, depending on the payment gateway that you're using on your system, the parameter names here might be slightly different. But they all should have something similar to this, some form of message that's returned by the payment gateway. So if a customer complains that a transaction has failed, this would be a good place to come into to get some more information on why it's failed. The message that we see here is what would have been returned back to the customer from the payment gateway. So when we need to reconcile a transaction, we should see a blue icon beside the transaction. So if we have a look at a direct deposit example here, it takes us to a new page. We see the information about the transaction, how much should have been paid. We can then enter the total amount that was paid and also add a transaction number as a reference for the transaction. By clicking process here, the transaction is then marked as completed.